Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and welcome to my Blade Guide, where you're going to learn everything you need to know about how to build him, and also how good he actually is. In this guide we'll be going over Blade's power level, how his abilities work, his best rotation and combat tricks, his best relics and stats, strongest Lightcones, how strong each Eidolon is, and of course, his best teams. Blade is a destruction wind character that pushes the destruction path to new damaging heights, and when invested in correctly, can absolutely go toe-to-toe with the highest damage dealers currently in the game and the strongest team compositions. He sports good single target damage and exceptional area of effect. And when accompanied by his ideal teammates, he has no issues clearing all of endgame at Eidolon 0 with a 4-star Lightcone at the time of his release. Blade is unique. He doesn't consume that many skill points for his standard rotation, but does consume a large portion of his life instead. This opens up new team building options, allowing you to allocate those skill points you save with Blade to other team members on your team. But you will have to manage his life carefully and hopefully have a strong healer on your account. You can go with double damage setups or use some underutilized supports who rely a lot more on skill points to support Blade. Blade is exceptionally powerful but thrives on investment. The more you can invest into him, the better he'll be. Be careful to note that he scales off HP instead of attack, so you might need to farm some new relics for him. His best in slot set is also brand new in patch 1.2, so if you don't have it yet, you might need to get to farming that. Additionally, some of the more powerful options for Blade's teams are 5-star characters, being Bronya, Silverwolf, and Luocha. There are a lot of other viable teams, but some of his strongest ones include them. So, definitely a character who wants to see some investment. At the time of his release, I absolutely consider Blade to be a top tier damage dealer. Assuming you have the right relics, stats, Lightcone, and team members in place, he completely destroys endgame and is a complete blast to play, taking the crown as one of my favorite characters in the game currently. So let me show you guys exactly how to build Blade so he destroys everything and who he best partners with. Blade's entire kit is focused on taking as much damage and as many hits as possible. In addition to that, all of his abilities scale not only off attack, but also HP. He's a hybrid scaling character. Now, Blade scales way stronger off of HP than attack though, so much so that when building him and considering his abilities, you pretty much want to completely ignore the attack scaling portions of his kit and focus exclusively on scaling his HP as much as possible. Blade's talent, Shuhu's Gift, is at the heart of what makes him so strong. It's a special buff that stacks up every single time his health is reduced by anything in the game. When you take damage from a dot, when you take damage from an enemy hitting you, when you sacrifice a portion of your life for another ability, or when you set your life to a lower value than it originally was. The only catch with Shuhu's Gift is you can only get one stack per instance of game mechanic. Meaning if you had a dot that dealt 5 instances of damage from that one dot activation, you'd only get 1 stack. But if you had 3 separate dots on you, a wind shear, a shock, and a bleed, you'd get 3 stacks instead. This is also true for attacks that can hit multiple times in a single strike. Like a big lightning storm attack, which strikes the entire team like 10 or 20 times, you'd only get 1 stack from that. When reaching 5 stacks of Shuhu's Gift after taking 5 sources of damage, Blade will immediately trigger a massive AoE follow-up attack, which deals damage based off his attack, but most importantly, his life. It'll also heal him for 25% of his max HP and set the charges straight back to 0. It also generates 10 energy and deals 1 break unit of toughness to every enemy on the field. Shuhu's Gift is a massive part of Blade's AoE damage, and his bonus ability Cyclone of Destruction increases it by a further 20%. Blade's skill, Hellscape, is a bit special. Unlike most characters, it doesn't deal damage. It's a self-buff which modifies the way Blade plays, and your aim should be to keep it up at all times. Activating Hellscape costs 1 skill point and 30% of Blade's max HP. Paying the life cost of Hellscape will of course grant you 1 charge of Shuhu's Gift. Activating Hellscape also doesn't use Blade's turn, so you'll be able to use another ability straight after using Hellscape, but you are unable to activate Hellscape at all while it is already active. You'll need to wait for the buff's duration to time out before you can use it again. While Hellscape is active, Blade gains a large amount of increased damage, and most importantly, his basic attack is converted from its standard form to an empowered form. Hellscape lasts 3 turns, but on the turn you activate it, you're not going to lose any duration. So you'll have Hellscape for a total of 4 enhanced basic attacks, meaning you're not going to have to use it too often. It's also worth noting, Hellscape, despite being a skill and having a cost, does not generate Blade any energy. Blade's basic attack has 2 forms, and the second one, activated by Hellscape, is pretty much all you're going to be using. You should never use Blade's basic attack without Hellscape active. Because of that fact, we're only going to be covering the empowered version, Forest of Swords. The main thing to notice about Forest of Swords is it doesn't generate any skill points when you use it, despite being a basic attack, but doesn't consume any either. Interestingly enough, it also generates 30 energy instead of the traditional 20 for most basic attacks, helping Blade's rotation out a lot. Forest of Swords consumes 10% of Blade's max HP when you activate it, but grants you a stack of Shuhu's gift in the process. It's a blast attack that deals good damage to a single target and decent damage to the adjacent enemies, and deals 2 break units of wind toughness to the primary target and 1 to the surrounding. And of course, like all Blade's abilities, it scales on HP and attack, but HP is all you need to worry about. Blade's bonus ability, Never-Ending Deaths, adds a bonus effect to his Forest of Swords enhanced basic attack. When he hits an enemy which has their weakness broken, he'll recover 5% of his max HP plus an extra 100 life, helping out with sustain a little bit. Blade's technique, Karma Wind, is a standard entry technique, but consumes 20% of his max HP when you use it, which will of course grant you a stack of his talent. But it also deals a pretty good amount of damage based off of his life to all enemies. Finally, Blade's ultimate, Death Sentence, is a culmination of his entire kit. It costs 130 energy and is a blast area of effect attack. It deals 2 break units of toughness to the primary target and 1 to the adjacent, and has a lot of special effects. Death Sentence has Blade's signature attack and max life scaling, which works exactly like the rest of his kit and makes up a good portion of Death Sentence damage. But it also has an additional effect that scales based off of how much life Blade has lost before using his ultimate. You can see here, it says that it deals 90% of the total HP he has lost in the current battle. Now, in order to ensure Blade doesn't have infinite scaling and be completely broken, this does have a cap. We can see here, the total HP Blade has lost in the current battle is capped at 90% of his max HP. And in addition to that, the value is reset and reaccumulated after his ultimate has been used. What this essentially means is in order to deal maximum damage with Death Sentence, you're going to need to take damage or sacrifice life equal to 90% of Blade's max HP before you use Death Sentence every time, or you'll be losing some damage. Now, 90% might sound like a lot to sacrifice, but fortunately, Death Sentence has an additional cost. Upon activating it, it'll set Blade's HP to 50% of his max. And if you are at 100%, that counts as consuming 50% of Blade's life. In addition to that, Blade's skill consumes 30% of its max life, and his enhanced basic attacks consume 10%. Generally, every single ultimate you cast, you're going to be using 3 to 4 Forest of Swords, that's 40%, at least 1 skill, most of the time that's 30%, and that's already 70% life, meaning you'd only have to sacrifice 20% with Death Sentence to deal the maximum potential damage with his ultimate. Blade's entire kit is themed around sacrificing life. Something cool though is if you don't have enough life to activate an ability like the 30% for Hellscape, it'll just sacrifice everything you already do have and set his life to 1, so you can pretty much always use all of Blade's abilities for the most part. Finally, to emphasize, you will only gain a stack of Shuhu's gift when Blade's health is reduced, meaning if he's hit while shielded, you will not see the charge stack increase until he is hit without the shield. With so much emphasis on life sacrifice, Blade's final bonus ability we haven't covered, Vita Infinita, is pretty welcome. It grants him 20% increased healing done to him when his HP is at 50% or lower. This is a pretty nice one as it'll boost the other bonus ability, which grants him life from Forest of Swords, but also the life he gains from Shuhu's Gift, boosting that up a considerable amount. Level up Blade's abilities in the following order. Try and keep levels in everything if possible, but prioritize his basic attack first. Maxing this out is comparatively cheaper than leveling up the other three. Next, prioritize his talent and ultimate as they are a massive portion of his damage. Hellscape is the last priority as you don't get that much when leveling it, but it can be a nice bonus as a last priority if you have the materials available. Grab Blade's bonus abilities when they become available, and also prioritize the critical strike rating and HP small nodes when you can afford them. Blade's rotation is incredibly easy to follow. His ultimate costs 130 energy, and his enhanced basic attacks generate 30 energy. 4 of those gives you 120 energy. When you use the ultimate, you're going to regenerate 5, so we're sitting at 125. If you trigger Shuhu's Gift even once, or you get hit at all, you're going to have an easy, clean 4-action rotation for Blade. You can push a 3-action rotation very easily though, through taking a bit of combat damage or through triggering Shuhu's Gift multiple times. So you can expect a 4-action rotation most of the time, but a 3-action rotation when things go your way. When preparing for battle, it's recommended to use Blade's technique, as it'll allow you to start the battle with 1 stack of Shuhu's Gift. Playing Blade optimally is incredibly simple. All you need to do is ensure you always have Hellscape active. Make sure to check every time it's Blade's turn so you never use a basic attack without it active because you'll lose a lot of damage. But outside of that, all you need to do is spam his enhanced basic attack. The difficulty and the complexity comes from what you're doing with the rest of your teammates in relation to Blade. So that pretty much sums up Blade's combat. Outside of saving ultimates for buff windows and targeting enemies correctly with blast attacks, there's not a whole lot left to him. So while playing him is incredibly simple, team building for him is anything but. Blade consumes a ridiculous amount of his own life, up to 90% of it just to max out the ultimate. And he can recover a bit of that with Shuhu's Gift and sometimes against broken enemies with Forest of Swords, but the rest of the healing which he'll need is going to have to come from his healer. And that healer is going to come from one of 3 places in patch 1.2. In order of strength for Blade, Luocha is definitely his best healer. Even a poorly geared Luocha can keep Blade alive without any issues without even consuming skill points. Bailu is also an excellent healer for him, and can do pretty well. However, she's going to have to use her skill occasionally to keep Blade topped up and ensure that he can use his ultimate to sacrifice a portion of his life. Although for the most part, she's a pretty effective healer if you've got some pretty good gear on her. Natasha, lastly here, is also a reasonable choice for Blade, and she is fairly viable with him. However, you're going to want some pretty reasonable gear for her. You can use Natasha's skill quite nicely with Blade because every time he has an action, he'll be healed over time from her skill's heal. However, overall, I had a very easy time with Luocha, never using his skill. I used Bailu's skill every now and then when testing Blade, but Natasha, I definitely had a few team members dip low when trying to keep Blade alive with a Natasha team. Another thing that complicates team building a little bit is that you never really want to shield Blade. So a character like Trailblazer Fire and Japad are out as defensive options. And a character like March 7th, while she can put her shield on someone else, like herself, the crowd control is going to limit Blade's damaging potential from Shuhu's Gift, so it's also not preferred. So why are we talking about this in the rotation section? Well, a big part of Blade's rotation is keeping him alive. And while he doesn't use very many skill points himself, for reference, Blade uses about 3 skill points every 8 cycles solo, compared to a traditional damaging character who uses about 12 to 14. He does need to allocate some of those skill points he saves, most of the time, to a healer who is on his team. So you'll need to factor into your Blade's rotation, healing him with Bailu, Natasha, or in the case of Luocha, not healing him at all with a skill, but for the most part, budget some of your skill points for healing when playing Blade, and be attentive with it and don't be afraid to use that skill on him. We'll cover the rest of team building at the end of the video because it's by far the most important part of playing Blade. Blade's best in slot 4 piece is Longvis Disciple, and it's not even remotely close, so if you're playing him, you're eventually going to want to farm this. But you can mix and match 2-piece sets of Longvis Disciple, Eagle of Twilight Line, and Hackerspace if you don't have a good 4-piece ready. But getting to that 4-piece sooner rather than later is recommended, as it's really the only truly powerful set for Blade. Next up is Planar Ornaments, of which he has 2 options which are incredibly powerful for him: Inert Salsato and Rudolent Arena. Both of these are within 1 to 2% of each other, so you can use either of them depending on which one has better substats. Salsato is a little bit easier to gear for, only requiring 50% critical strike rating to activate its full effect. Rudolent requires 70%, so it's a little bit harder. I personally recommend Salsato as it has a tiny edge in endgame DPS, but overall you can use either of them. For Blade's relics, on his body armor you have a few options. Critical strike damage is going to be best in endgame, but if you don't have enough crit rate yet, you can go ahead and use a crit rate body armor. If you can't get either crit rate or crit damage, you can use HP. When gearing up Blade's critical strike damage and rate, make sure you maintain a ratio of 1% critical strike rating for every 2% critical strike damage you have. A good example of this would be having 50% critical strike rating for 100 critical strike damage, or 100% critical strike rating for 200% critical strike damage. Don't forget you get a lot of critical strike rating from Longvis Disciple. For boots, use speed. For the planar sphere, wind damage is best, but you can use HP until you can get a wind damage one. For the rope, use HP. Blade's best substats are as follows. Crit rate and crit damage are the best. Maintain a 1-to ratio as mentioned earlier, and pay close attention to the fact that you can activate your planar set of choice, so 50% or 70% crit rate depending on your option. Don't go over 100% crit rate though. Pay close attention to Longvis Disciple's passive, and if you have it, his E2, as those both give you crit rate which isn't shown on your character sheet. After getting as much crit rate and crit damage as you can, the other 2 substats to be on the lookout for are HP percentage and speed, which are also both excellent. HP percentage is a generic damage increase. Get as much of it as you can. When it comes to speed though, getting it is great, but there's 2 big breakpoints which increase his power in Memory of Chaos specifically a lot. 121 speed and 134 speed. You may also want to get a little bit more than this if you're playing him with Bronya. Next up is Lightcones, and of course his signature is by far the best for him, so we'll be comparing everything else to it. A quick note with the signature though is that all of his abilities that consume life do so before dealing damage, so the third portion of it here, increasing his damage by 24%, is always going to be activated on his ultimate and his enhanced basic attack. Alright, so outside of his signature, what else do we have on the table? Well, the next best option by far is a Secret Vow. It gives him generic damage increase as well as a extra damage boost when he's lower life than the enemy. In addition to that, it also has great base HP, making it a really good second place. Now, the other Lightcones right now are honestly not the best, but I would recommend on the Fall of an Aeon if you already have it leveled as a stopgap to getting a Secret Vow or his signature. It's not great, but it's also not terrible, and you likely already have it leveled. Some other options include Under the Blue Sky and Mutual Demise, but they're definitely nowhere near as good as a Secret Vow or his signature. To give you guys more context though on how much better each of the Lightcones are than each other so you guys can make an educated decision, I decided to take my personal 3 frontrunners and fully calculate them using full rotations in Google Sheets. You can find these sheets down below and take a look yourself at the results. I compared on the Fall of an Aeon S5 to a Secret Vow, which also is compared to his signature. Let's take a look at the results. So these results show how each Lightcone stacks up. A few quick notes: a Secret Vow doesn't have its extra damage against enemies who are higher life than you, and on the Fall of an Aeon isn't getting its bonus damage after you break an enemy. So these Lightcones are being shown at their bare minimum. Our baseline Lightcone, unreachable side S1 here, is listed at 100%. And we can see how everything else compares. So S5 unreachable for AoE and single target is roughly 18% more damage. And we can see S5 Vow is 83% as good as S1 unreachable, without taking into account its second effect. S1 Vow is definitely not bad either, and the Herder Cone is honestly not the worst, but of course the signature is king, but some of the freer options and easier to access ones don't stack up half bad either. For those looking to invest more in Blade, his Eidolons are up next. And in a similar fashion, I've got some charts for you guys here, which can all be found down below with more details on how they were calculated. Every number I quote as a percentage increase is compared to the previous Eidolon. Blade's Eidolon 1 adds a new multiplier to his ultimate, which works in a similar fashion to the accumulation multiplier already on it. It's essentially what we've already got, but again and better, meaning we get a massive damage increase for his ultimate. On single target, this results in a roughly 18% more damage increase, and on AoE, it's only an 8.5% more damage increase because you get so much more damage from the talent. Blade's E2 give you a ton of free crit rate when you use Hellscape, and it's pretty much going to be permanently active, which is great, but make sure you don't overcap on crit as it is very easy to get to 100% with good gear and Longvis Disciple as his set bonus. This works out to be roughly 8.9% more damage in both single target and AoE. Blade's E3 is ability levels and gives you 4% more damage in single target and 4.8% more damage in AoE. Blade's E4 grants him max HP percentage when his life dips below 50%, and that can stack up to 2 times. He gains 20% per stack, so a total of 40% after he dips below 50% twice. So this is pretty much always going to proc when he activates his ultimate, but also likely going to activate when he uses Hellscape and some other things in battle. Overall, this increases his damage a lot, and the most conservative estimate, only getting a stack when he uses his ultimate, pitches this at roughly 11% more single target damage and roughly 10% more AoE damage. Blade's E5 is ability levels again and is roughly 6% more damage in both AoE and single target. Blade's E6 changes the stack number of Shuhu's gift required to activate from 5 to 4, increasing activation frequency. It also increases the HP scaling modifier on Shuhu's gift a massive amount, further increasing its damage. This results in a 21.5% damage increase for single target and a 34% damage increase for AoE, really juicing things up. Finally, let's finish exploring Blade's best team compositions. Most of your Blade teams are going to start out like this: Blade and your strongest healer. But even with a healer like Natasha or Bailu who uses skill points, you're going to end up with a lot left over. So what are you going to do with those? When it comes to filling the final 2 slots and consuming our remaining skill points, you have 3 options you can pull from. You can use a Harmony character, an Agility character, or you can bring an extra damage dealer. The last option is incredibly open-ended. You can bring literally any damage dealer, assuming you can sustain their skill point usage. But if you do bring a second damage dealer in this slot, chances are you're going to need to bring another skill point generator. A good example of this would be perhaps bringing Clara as the secondary damage, and bringing a support like Pella to generate skill points for the team. Double damage setups are great, but because they're so open-ended, I'll leave that to you guys. But if you're interested in focusing solely on Blade, let's talk about his best options. All Harmony characters provide attack boosts in their kit, and unfortunately Blade can't get too much out of that, but a large amount of Harmony characters have other effects which Blade can get use out of. Tinyun's ultimate grants energy and damage, Yukong's ultimate grants crit rate and crit damage, and Asta's ultimate grants speed. Now, unfortunately, I don't think any of these characters, based on my testing, were better than traditional double damage setups with Pella, but your mileage may vary. Bronya, however, is absolutely a beast with Blade. It feels like she was almost made for him. They are a power duo and absolutely work phenomenally together. Bronya's biggest downside is that when using her skill to boost a character's action, she consumed an inordinate amount of skill points. However, Blade doesn't have that problem. So not only does Bronya consume less skill points with Blade, but she has more to work with as well because Blade doesn't use any. This creates a scenario in which you can use Bronya's skill every single action. She is absolutely a straight up broken unit with Blade, and she over doubles his damage effortlessly. Her ultimate is also very synergistic with Blade, giving him a ton of crit damage, and he already has insane crit rating. The other option to bring with Blade are Nihility characters, and we have some pretty good options, first of which is Welt. Welt is interesting because he brings a pretty good amount of personal damage while also bringing a good amount of utility. If you have a geared up Welt who is already capable of damage, he's going to be a good accompaniment to Blade and can use all the skill points that are spare. In addition to that, his ultimate also gives Blade more damage, which is fantastic as well. There is one anti-synergy though, and that is that he imprisons enemies and breaks for imaginary, meaning enemies will be slower and hit Blade less, so you will get a few less stacks of Shuhu's gift as a result, but still a decent partner nonetheless. Next is Pella, who has a great ultimate for Blade, but unfortunately doesn't consume any skill points, so you're still going to have even more skill points to use, meaning she's best paired with another heavy skill point consuming character like a double damage setup, or even sometimes Bronya if you have a healer who does need a few skill points to keep the team alive. Definitely a good option when you need a few more skill points and for those double damage setups. Lastly is Silver Wolf, which I would say is definitely his second best support next to Bronya. Silver Wolf can provide the team Windbreak, which is great for damage multiplying for Blade, Elemental Penetration, and massive defense Tread, all of which massively multiply Blade's damage, and she can also serve as a bit of a pseudo double damage kind of setup here because she has great personal damage herself. She can spam her skill alongside Blade and it's a great team. In testing, the strongest team I could find for endgame was the following: Blade with Bronya, Silver Wolf, and Luocha. Luocha didn't use any skill points at all to keep the team alive. Bronya used her skill every single action for Blade, and Bronya was just a bit slower than Blade, so you could have Blade take an action and Bronya would boost him straight after, giving Blade double damage essentially, at minimum. And then Silver Wolf would scoop up the remainder of the skill points to apply weakness and defense shred with her ultimate. If you're interested in more info on this team composition specifically, how it works and all the nuances behind it, you can find an extra showcase video on my channel which goes over how strong it actually is, and it really was a pleasure to play. Hopefully you guys enjoyed my Blade guide, and until next time, good luck with your pulls, cheers.